Welcome to the Alaskan Journey podcast. My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm your first friend in Alaska, and luckily for you, I'm also an associate real estate broker in South Central Alaska. And the purpose of this podcast is to answer the question of what is it like living in Alaska from the perspective of people who actually live up here. And today I'm very lucky to be joined by John Mann. He is going to be talking about having lived up here for about a decade and barbecuing and all that fun stuff. So, John, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. So let's go and just jump into it real quick. How long have you guys lived in Alaska and where did you come from?
We grew up and lived in the Kansas City, Missouri area for all of our life. My wife and I for 40 plus years, I guess it was. And we moved up just a little over 10 years ago now. And we've originally moved to the Anchorage area until we could figure out exactly where it was and where we fit in and where we liked it the most and that type of thing. So we lived there for about 9 months or so and then got an apartment here in Eagle River and then eventually bought a house and live out with the bears out by the nature center is where we're at now.
Oh, no way. That's where you guys are at?
Yeah. We're back behind the nature center. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to have to talk afterwards.
Okay.
I'm trying to get some drone shots of bears out there, but
nice.
I got a plan, but I need help. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. What brought you guys here initially? Like what kind of got Alaska onto the radar for y'all?
It really, it's been a dream of mine my entire life. I love the outdoors. I love hunting and fishing. You know, I would do it for a living if I could have figured out how to do it. I just never managed to do that. But I get asked this question a lot. Why Alaska? And I was like, Alaska. I mean, I don't know how to explain it to people that have never been here and spent any time up here. But I warn people, if you come visit, you're going to want to stay. You know, if you enjoy Colorado or Montana or any, going to Yellowstone National Park and things like that honestly is our backyard. And, we come up here and my oldest daughter, second child, was stationed in Fairbanks and her and her husband got married up here and I flew up here right before one of them got sent off to Afghanistan, and they were doing a kind of a quick wedding before he left, and came up here and kind of fell in love with it. 2 years later, we came up and visited because they were getting PCS'd out. For all you military people, you understand that. So, and they were concerned they weren't going to get their car down to San Antonio in time because they needed it. It was so we flew up, spent a week or so up here messing around, and drove one of their cars back and made a vacation out of it, getting back. And at that point, I just absolutely fell in love with it. And so I was teaching school at the time, and we decided that hey, let's give it a shot. So I threw my resume up against the wall and got somebody to bite and got an offer up here to come up and teach. And we just did it. It was kind of on a whirlwind. I literally got hired 3 weeks before school started.
Oh,
and we were still in Kansas City, Missouri. So we were planning on it, but it was a whirlwind to get everything loaded, get everything logistically figured out, and the move was on. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we got up here anyway. That's
wild. Like what did your friends and family think in Missouri when you said you were moving to Alaska and, you got 3 weeks to make the move happen?
They were kind of surprised. They knew we were talking about it. Most of the close friends and family had mentioned it to it. My oldest, my son, actually got mad at me. Yeah, John, if you're watching, yeah, hey. But no, we it created a little bit of attention. It was like, hey, we were up and leaving our family in Kansas City, and all honesty, I was being selfish. It was like, hey, I've done all this all my life for my kids. My kids were, they're all adults, and I had one still in the house.
Right.
And she didn't care. She was like, yeah, whatever, but my older kids were kind of thought we were abandoning them or whatever. And then some of my friends are like, you'll be back in a year or two, you'll miss everybody and come back. And so here I am 10 years later, and my kids don't come up to visit very often, but I always go down to Kansas City, so we still get to hang out with them.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What was that move like then? You've got like that starting pistol that just went off, and you've got to do in a couple weeks what it takes a lot of people, sometimes upwards of a year to do. So what was that like?
We actually had been preparing for it, and so the original idea was my wife was going to stay in Kansas City with my youngest daughter, my adopted daughter there. The idea was I was going to come up and start a teaching job, figure out, where we wanted to stay, what we wanted to do, and all that kind of stuff. And they were going to stay. So we had kind of prepped for a lot of that. We still had, I had several rental properties down there, and I'd pre-sold everything except for one. We moved into one of our rentals. And at that point, they were going to stay there, and I was going to come up here, and then we would figure it out from there once I got settled. And so, it was more of, all right, I threw all my tools, I loaded my Harley, and, personal items, and, all my hunting and fishing gear and all that stuff, we ended up throwing it all in a trailer and, loaded the truck up and headed north. My wife came up, with us. And then once I got up here, I started out just renting a room from an individual out South Anchorage, out by the zoo out there.
Right.
Yeah. And didn't know anything about it. I just stumbled across Marketplace. I'm like, all right, we'll do this and see what happens, and moved in there, and then spent my weekends riding around in my Harley or driving the truck, just driving everywhere, just trying to figure out the layout, where everything was at, and how long it took to commute from different areas, and what town or what city or what area really up here. Borough, I guess, is what we call them up here, right? What borough or
yeah. And I'm glad to hear you say that was kind of your process, because that's definitely something I tell a lot of people when they're first coming up here is, they want to go look at houses like very first thing, and it's like, no, it's the area first. Like, you got to spend that time in the car driving around and kind of getting the vibe for the tribe in all the different areas, just to make sure it's the right area first.
Yeah, it was a big decision, actually. And then we, when we first purchased, I rented an apartment. I was riding my Harley one weekend out by myself, and started riding out through Eagle River Road here in Eagle River and out towards the nature center. And I just remember having that feeling like this is exactly what I envisioned in my head, where I wanted to live when I was, riding through the area. And so I started looking at that point, and we still hadn't sold. We still had the house down there, and my wife was still staying there, so we weren't committed yet to buy. And so I just started kind of looking around, and I found an apartment for rent out there, about halfway out where we live now, and I rented that for it was about a year, I guess. And shortly after I rented that, my youngest daughter, my adopted daughter, she's decided, she's like, Dad, I want to move to Alaska and live up here with you. And it was her senior year in high school. So the summer before her senior year, she said, I wanted to come to Alaska. And so we got the apartment, got her enrolled in Eagle River High School. And, just from there, it's just, we've been really happy here. It's a small town feel. You feel like you know everybody, but you don't know anybody at times. Mainly, we landed at ACF Church. Let me throw a plug out there for them. Became, that was our church family, and started getting involved there, and it just fit, for us. We were rural enough. The community was big enough to have, the Walmarts, the Fred Meyers, decent restaurants, but anything we really need here. And we're only, 20-minute drive or so to the airport. And, talked about not knowing everybody. It's a military thing, right? So we joke about it at church. It's every 3 years we have a whole new congregation because of the transfer PCSs and all that kind of stuff. And so, that's good and bad. Nice to have new blood coming in, but you miss some of the relationships that move away too. So
yeah, no, it's at this point. Yeah, I think I've seen probably like 2 or 3 different ACF churches in the time, just because, like you said, like it just rotates in and out just with the PCS season. So I mean, that just kind of is what it is, though.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it's been. We were traveling just recently, gone for almost 3-4 weeks with our barbecue stuff. And we're down in Tennessee, and we actually got to visit some friends that had PCS'd and moved down there. So it was kind of a neat thing to do that too. So
absolutely. What was it like getting into kind of a workflow up here? Like, did you notice there were any big differences between, I guess, work environment in Alaska versus down in Missouri?
Again, I came up here as a teacher. I took a job as an elementary health teacher. We could talk about that for a whole nother hour, but I went from teaching high school building trades to teaching elementary kids health, which I was certified to do, but came up here, and a lot of the differences that I noticed that I like, it's kind of fun to talk about. It's, snow days. I was told when I got hired on, we don't have snow days. I was like, well, okay, all right. So now ice is a different thing. I actually showed up to work one morning. Took me almost 45 minutes to get to my school, and got there, and my principal says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, well, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, they canceled school." I said, "You said we didn't have snow days." She said, it was ice. Nobody could get here. So anyway, I just stayed in and worked and got some work done anyway because I was there. But, so it was fun. Different things like they go out to recess, outdoor recess, unless the wind chill is below 10 below. My lower 48 kids would not handle it, but we've got the Alaska kids, especially the ones that have grown up here. They're out running around without coats on and everything.
Yeah.
The first thing they do is shed their coat and go play. But so it's, as far as a work environment, pretty much the same. In the teaching realm. Now, since I've retired, I've gone back to my construction roots and doing handyman. I do a lot of punch lists for real estate realtors and stuff like that. But I've noticed it seems pretty similar. I don't think there's really anything major difference other than the fact that the costs are definitely higher up here. As far as across the board on most things, but it's not insane. You guys really, first they find out you live in Alaska, and it's like, do you live in an igloo? Do you mush dogs back and forth to work? It's like, no, and, we don't have, it's not $12 a gallon for milk here in our area, in the Anchorage Borough, Bowl area.
And I love you have to like Specify in our area.
in our area. Yeah. Now, remote villages, I don't know enough about to even talk about that, but I understand, there definitely is a difference. Had I come up here 30 years ago and been younger, I would have loved to taught and coached in a more remote area. I just, with a wife and family, when I moved up, it probably would not have worked very well with my family.
It is a completely different animal. Like I think it was Melissa Cook. She came on before. She was author of a book. She was like a teacher that went to some really remote villages and taught. And she wrote a book about it and had her on the show and everything. But yeah, it is a completely different animal teaching in those small villages out in the middle of nowhere. Like some people are built for it. Others, it's gonna be a rough ride.
Yeah, my first principal that was up here, she had done that when she first started, and some of the stories she was telling were pretty intense, but also very intriguing, and interesting. I'm working towards the barbecue side. Once we'll get into that, I'm sure. But I would love to go to some remote villages and teach the kids how to barbecue. Start out by going up there and let's build a drum smoker and one day, and then they'll teach you how to cook on it the next day. And selfishly, I would get the opportunity to go visit some of the places, but it also would be a good introduction to to different things that they probably have not been exposed to, from the outside communities. So.
Yeah, so tell me more about Alaska barbecue.
Oh, wow.
I'm seeing a lot on Facebook about that recently, so what's up?
Yeah, so, first of all, let me throw a plug out there. My social media stuff is AK for Alaska, BBQ for barbecue, and then Mann, M-A-N-N. So Alaska Barbecue Man is all of my social media, on Facebook, Instagram. Yes, I have a TikTok account. I never thought I would, but I do.
Do you do the dances and everything?
I don't do the dances. I actually had one of my young cooks that out of Texas. A couple of the girls, they taught me one of the little dances, and we did it down in Memphis in May last year. But so anyway, being a retired school teacher, I do miss teaching and coaching. I coached for years also, from competitive little league all the way up to varsity sports. And I miss that. So kind of combine my love for barbecue, eating and all that, and, and smoking, grilling, barbecuing, meats of all kinds, to with my love of teaching kids and being involved with kids, just kind of threw it out there and combined. So about less than 5 years ago or so, I took a class to become a competition barbecue judge. And I thought, maybe I'll learn how to barbecue better if I do this. And I went from doing that to being on the board of the Alaska Barbecue Association, till being asked to be a contest representative for the two of the biggest sanctioning bodies in the world, Kansas City Barbecue Society and Steak Cook-Off Association, and becoming contest rep. So basically means we run the contest, all the judging, all the rules, make sure all the rules are followed, and all that kind of stuff. And
it is wild to me, like hearing how organized this is. Like I thought people just showed up and served meat, but no, it's a lot more.
It's a whole different ball game. I mean, you may be the best rib cook in your neighborhood, and if you would go to a true sanctioned event and competition, you'll get annihilated on scores because it's a different thing. You're cooking to a criteria, not necessarily, for instance, fall off the bone ribs. Everybody thinks that's just amazing. Well, that's actually overcooked in a competition barbecue. So, but it is, we have what we call professional teams. There's very few that do it full time, and that's all they do, unless they have a barbecue related business also. Most of them are working jobs and have jobs where they can, travel a lot all over the lower 48. But, our local cooks up here, they're all work normal jobs. They do it, part time. We have 4 or 5 contests a year up here on average, depending on, it's down this year a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's a whole different ball game. But, back to the kids, I guess, we decided to form, it's almost 3 years ago now, Alaska, AKBBQ INC, so Alaska Barbecue Incorporated, which is a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, which I had to learn all about that stuff. I had no idea all that. Anyway, so we founded our nonprofit, and it's strictly to get kids involved and teach them culinary skills in barbecue, smoking, grilling. We do some things like sausage making and all related to that, but basically culinary arts, introducing them to competitive food sports. There's actually a term, they're called food sport athletes. Now it's taken off. There's national TV shows about Texas high school barbecue. And matter of fact, just last week in Kansas, they had the National High School Barbecue Championship, and a team out of, forgive me if I mess this up, but Shawnee, Kansas won. And for them to beat like the Texas teams, that's a big deal. So my goal would be, I would love to get, a couple contests a year up here at high school level teams to compete and then go represent the state of Alaska at the national. So any culinary teachers out there, if you're listening, let's do this. Let's get this rolling. So that's kind of a nutshell of what, but we literally travel all over the world running contests. We had talked a little bit earlier off camera here, but got an invite a year ago, asked if I would come run a contest in Costa Rica in January. And like Alaska in January or Costa Rica in January, that was kind of a no-brainer, right? So we went down and hung out on the beaches for a week and ran a contest in Costa Rica. And my Spanish is not very good. Barely conversational. And there was concern about that. But we went to a town called Jaco, which is on the West Coast, and just absolutely beautiful. And we just had a blast. We ended up staying a couple extra days on our own dime, watching the sunset on the beach every single night. And but being my body is more fit for Alaska weather than it is for beach weather, and it was only in the mid to upper 80s, but it was like 90% humidity, and I sweat profusely, and so I was uncomfortable a lot of times with the weather, but it wasn't 15 to 20 degrees like it was up here in January. So that is true. Yeah. I mean, this year you didn't miss a whole lot of a winter either. So that was definitely, we went from the year before last having a record over 10 feet of snowfall, and then last year we hardly had any. Yeah,
and then it wasn't like that cold either. Like that was the thing too, where it got a little cold this year, but like last year, a year before that, it was like, -20, -15. So not Fairbanks, but definitely pushing the envelope for what we're used to. And this year it was hung around like maybe 10.
Yeah, and that's one thing I talk a lot about when people are asking me, well, what's the weather like? And I'm like, I get people from the Midwest, especially upper Midwest, like, Kansas City north up, in the Iowa and North South Dakota. There's frequently times that the weather is colder down there than it is up here in the Anchorage area. Mm-hmm. And I really point that out for anybody that's that's checking on that. We're kind of protected in what they call the Anchorage Bowl down here, being up against the coast, and then protected by a bowl of mountains, I guess is the easiest way of putting it. But our weather, winter weather up here is not that much different than like Kansas City. You know, we'll get negative 10, 15, but a week?
Yeah, like
sometimes, sometimes just a couple
yeah.
days, and then you're back into the high teens, low 20s. Is what I would consider a normal Alaska winter day. Up here would be, 15 to 25 degrees. And the difference is the snow. I mean, on a typical winter, I'd tell everybody we usually have snow on the ground. Make it easy. Think Halloween to Easter. Pretty close to that. I mean, we may have a week or so on each side, and then if you have dry years like this year, that we had bare ground in what was it, February, March, at least. So it was unusual, but
Well, that, and we also had that free rainstorm in January with the driving 80-mile-per-hour winds going through Eagle River.
Yeah, and that was kind of something to get used to was 70, 80, 90-mile-an-hour winds. They call them hurricanes in Florida. We call it Tuesday here in Alaska sometimes.
Yeah, by the way, no insurance for high winds in Alaska. So.
Oh, yeah. And there's, the valley, the Matanuska sit in the valley. They seem to have more than others, but where I live is in a pretty tight area of mountains in a valley and up Eagle River Valley there, and it funnels through there pretty hard at times. We've got furniture on the deck getting blown around, but it's something you get used to. It's not a big deal. It doesn't, it's not going to last a week. It's usually one part of a day,
Yeah.
It blows through. But yeah, that was, that. And should we talk about the earthquakes or?
I mean, we might as well. You've been here for about a decade at this point. So was the 2018 your first?
That was
got your bell rung?
That was the big one. And okay. I was actually at school, prepping for my class. I was teaching PE at the time, and I was here locally in Eagle River and had about, 20 kids in the preschool or before school activities in my gym messing around, and we had the big one hit, and I about fell over. I was trying to run across the gym floor to try to get to my kids to get them in a safe area, and I just grabbed 5 kids and just huddled them up, hugged them, and kind of hovered over the top of them for in the first round, and then it went into just natural. Hey, we got to do what we got to do to get everybody out of the building. Let's get them safe. Most of the kids, thankfully, were still in the school buses on the way to school. But yeah, that was a mess. But then the game, what I call the game, guess what what do they call it? The rating for.
Oh yeah.
I forget the terminology to use.
The Richter scale.
Richter scale. So yeah, the aftershocks were we have 3,000 of them in the next month or so, and it was funny, your house would shake, and you got to the point it's oh, that was just a 3.2. You try to guess and see if you get the closest. But the first few, it was kind of nerve wracking a little bit, kind of rattled. My wife was a little more uptight than I was. And I used to jump, and I could kind of determine how big it was by how much my whiskey bottles rattled on the shelf. She would laugh at me because occasionally I'd jump up and try to go over and hold on to them just to make sure nothing fell and broke. But it's it's interesting because I'd never been around them in Missouri, but it's to the point where it's really not that big a deal. It's kind of, it's almost kind of cool to experience it at some point, but of course, we hope and pray, it's not, a devastating one that hits, but it's definitely something you need to address and get used to. And
yeah, and I mean, luckily, most of the buildings here are built specifically for earthquakes and with those in mind. And I mean, what I found that was interesting, like I went and talked with a lot of people afterwards and actually talked with people over in Powder Ridge, and they didn't even realize there'd really been a big earthquake.
Yeah.
Like they're just on solid rock. Like you go a couple miles up the road and they've got their holding tanks for the septic system above ground because they can't dig down into the ground.
Yeah.
So yeah, people over there, they had no clue like something serious had just happened. And what was the because the violence of the shake, that was one thing, but really it was the duration that really started becoming unnerving. Because I mean, I was kind of in the same place. Class was about to start. I was teaching, I think it was middle school math and English, because of course they're going to give me two completely separate topics, no overlap whatsoever.
Nice.
And class was about to start. Everything started shaking. Just grab a couple kids, jump under a table, like the lights are going out, and you're just like looking out like the window through the door into the darkness. And it's like, okay, well, at what point do we just make a break for it with the kids and try to get outside? Because I don't know if this is going to stay up.
The duration was what was the intense part of it. And then the second, it was less than like 10, 15 minutes later, I think anyway, don't hold me to that. I don't remember exactly, but we had another big one, aftershock is what they called it. But I mean, it was as bigger than any other earthquake until the previous one. And, so then you go through, you make it through that first one that was extremely intense and lasted for way longer than anything you've ever felt. And then all of a sudden here comes another big one. And, then everybody just panics, and it was interesting. I shout out to all the teachers and staff that were there at the school I was at. And, I just kind of went into the safety mode, I guess. It's like, all right, matter of fact, I actually yelled at one of my other teachers who actually had kids there in the school, and she was going hysterical. And I basically grabbed her by the shoulders and was very rude to her, and told her, I said, look, we have to, you have to get it together. We got to take care of the rest of these kids. Your kids are fine. I've already checked on them. Let's go. And I apologized later, obviously, and then she thanked me. She says, thank you. I actually needed that, because I was just all focused on my own kids and thank you for kind of slapping me back into reality. And so,
yeah, because I mean, it doesn't matter like how much you've thought about it or training, like it's rattling. Like, I mean, some people are like really good on just kind of just snapping into the moment, and it's like, okay, let's go. And other people, you just don't know how you're going to respond. I mean, it's overwhelming and rattling, and you're just not going to know until you actually get there.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so is Alaska kind of what you were expecting when you moved up here? And I don't know. How is maybe this is a better question. How is Alaska different from what you expected it was going to be when you moved up here?
How is it different? That's a really good question. I think, the misconception everybody has from from watching all the Alaska shows on TV, and everything. I always tell everybody, I get that question 1,000 times when I'm traveling around. It's like, all right, I watched, The Deadliest Catch, or I watched, all those shows about living remotely and all that. And, you got to, so I had that picture in my head too, a little bit. And, hey, is everybody, not to the point where it's igloos and mush and dogs. I mean, we do have not so much igloos, but we do have people that have dogs, and run dogs for the Iditarod and stuff like that, which is a really cool hobby. But most of us don't. I do think that if you own a dog in Alaska, that you have to have 3. I think there's a rule there somewhere that I personally do not have any pets anymore because I like the freedom of travel, but it seems like nobody can have just a single dog up here. Everybody's kind of like 3 of them. But anyway, back to how is it different? Seeing some of that, you got to realize that, about 60% of what you see on TV is just the Hollywood factor in those shows. And so, we have Walmarts, we do all the same things. The difference is, something we haven't touched on is, the daylights, where we're at, it's not as drastic as up like Fairbanks and on farther north, but everybody's like, how do you deal with 24 hours of darkness? I'm like, well, we don't, because we don't have it down here. But that part was probably my hardest part, was going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark. When you only got 4 to 5 hours of daylight, right? And the end of December, 1st of January, and that takes some getting used to. But then on the bonus, the best time to live in Alaska is May, June, July, August. In my opinion, and you've got extended days. We're almost approaching summer solstice now. We're recording here in the first part of June, but the daylight, I mean, we'd be sitting on the deck, just, enjoying a beverage and maybe smoking a cigar. Like, man, I am really tired. Why? And you look down and, well, it's 11:30, it's still daylight outside. And, it's like, okay, so adjusting to some of that was probably something I hadn't thought about, so that'd probably be my easiest answer to your question, I guess.
Yeah. So for you during the summertime, I mean, during the winter, you're going to struggle just because it's so dark. But during the summer, do you also struggle with the amount of sunlight and just sleeping? Because I know for a lot of people, they can do all the blackout blinds and melatonin, but on some level, your brain still knows it's bright outside.
Yeah.
Some people can't sleep.
I do not have a problem with that. My wife, on the other hand, does. So we have the blackout curtains, and we have all of that, and sometimes she even has to sleep with the mask. And so, if that bothers you, there's ways of dealing with it. I mean, you can, it's so dark in our bedroom that if we don't turn the light on in the daytime, we can't, I'm going to stumble over something probably, but that's just mainly because of her.
Yeah.
For me, once I go to sleep, I've slept through some of the earthquakes we've had, so I don't struggle with that part of it. The knowing it's time to go to bed is that part of it is, it's like, all right, it's 11 o'clock, but it still looks like 7 p.m. Daylight outside, so it's kind of, that part of it, is probably, for the sleep part of it, is the hardest part. On the opposite end of it, there's been times where, what I have to say about the winter time up here in the darkness is you have to make yourself get out and do stuff. You will get cabin fever if you just go home and lock yourself and watch Netflix for every night, and you're not going to. First of all, you're not going to enjoy Alaska.
You're not really living.
Yeah, it is, and that's one of my principles when I first told me is like, you have to make yourself go to the gym or go do whatever it is you do, and so finding hobbies. You can still, instead of going out riding a motorcycle or a four-wheeler, you ride snow machines. We don't have manicured lawns up here, so we don't spend, most of us anyway. There are a few of them, a few of those crazies, but we, we don't have fancy equipment for lawnmowers and all that kind of stuff. But we do for snow removal. I've got a side by side with a big plow on it and a big monster snow blower, and but I live out rural, and it's a little different scenario than if you're going to live in town, and you're just doing a small driveway and a sidewalk. But that's find the equipment, buy some good winter stuff. There's all kinds of the proper shoes, the proper gloves, and stuff, and go hike. There's the hiking trails out in front of my house, the nature center, are open year round, and it's just you put your ice cleats on if you want them, and you still go hike, and you can do it in the summer and you can do it in the wintertime, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's a whole different set of beautiful in the wintertime up here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially down by the nature center. I mean, I'm, lived here for collectively over a decade at this point.
Yep.
And I mean, the nature center, that view down there is still takes my breath away every time I go down there. So
we consider ourselves very blessed to have that view and live in that area. We enjoy the wildlife in the yard all the time, and but here, even in Eagle River, you get the black bears wandered through the neighborhoods, and moose having babies in people's backyards, and there's if you enjoy that kind of stuff, seeing bald eagles all over the place, it's just it's a lot of fun. We really enjoy that. We have security cameras all around our house, and everybody always asks, "Is the crime rate high up here?" I'm like, no, it's pretty much so we can see what animals went through the yard last we weren't there. So,
and I mean, that's you get some pretty decent sized brown bears or grizzlies going through that area. So
yeah, we do. We've had a few over the last 2 years. Have been higher rates of seeing them. 3 years ago, we had a brown bear grizzly mom gave birth to triplets. And those three are about 2 to 3 years old now, and they're still in the area. Matter of fact, the black bears have been less since they've kind of come in.
It's like you like to hope those two things aren't connected, but they probably are.
Yeah, they had. I literally, not joking, I had a big black bear in my yard yesterday. I took pictures of it, and he actually, my neighbor accidentally left his garage door open and went on an errand, and he got in there and got a bag of dog food or bird seed or something and carried it up and was eating it, and I tried to chase it off. And, black bears, everybody's like, are they a big deal? If you live in the South, especially, in lower 48, you can pretty much think a black bear is about like a raccoon is down there.
Yeah.
They're just a pain in the butt, to be honest with you. They like to get into stuff. All they're trying to do is find something to eat. They're not really aggressive. They don't, they're not there, to kill humans. I mean, happens, but most of the time you can step on your deck, yell at them, and they take off, or even if you don't yell at them, they see you, they'll take off. But they're a nuisance. I've literally had one in the cab of my truck because I left my door unlocked, and they learned how to open that older style door handle I had on that truck and got in the cab of my truck. Didn't tear anything up.
It's like probably caught them before they hotwired it, and it's the last time you would have seen it.
Yeah, I selfishly was kind of hoping they'd tear my interior up so I get a new leather interior for only $500 deductible, but I didn't get that lucky. I had muddy bear prints in the seats of my car, so a truck. But
oh, that's so cool. All right. Well, in wrapping up here, what would you say are your big pros and cons of living in Alaska?
Let's see. Pros, definitely the opportunity to just see, in my opinion, God's creation every single day. You drive down the road and everywhere you look, you drive around the mountains and the view of those mountains change sometimes every 10 minutes. And something I didn't notice until I moved up here, and somebody actually pointed out to me, but you drive down the roads and there's not billboards there's not billboards anywhere up here.
Yeah.
And you don't think about it, but you drive by this mountain that you would think was beautiful in Colorado, but it doesn't have the condos all over it. You can drive a couple hours outside of town and just not see any houses, in certain areas. And so just the natural beauty of everything. The animals, of course, are phenomenal. Fishing, until you've gone and caught a salmon out of one of the glacier fed streams and rivers up here and cooked a fresh salmon, the opportunity to hunt. If that's what you want to do, there's all kinds of big game, small game to hunt up here. So that I'm of course outdoors, but that's my top. Cons. My biggest thing is probably being so far away from my family, having kids and grandkids in the Kansas City area, which I believe is somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 miles away. But we figured out a system. We figured out a way, where we actually, are traveling now with our barbecue related stuff and able to go kind of home base in the wintertime for several months at a time, out of Kansas City and spending time, with them and things like that. I can't afford to fly them all up here at one time, or I'd love to do it. But, that's my goal, is to try to get them, especially before my grandkids get too big. I want them to come experience all this, and understand all of it. But that would be the main con, I would say, for me, is just being so far away from family. But it's doable. You just got to get on a plane and do it.
Just got to go do the dang thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Outstanding. Well, John, I really do appreciate you coming on here to kind of share your perspective and kind of your story and everything with coming up here. So that's really appreciated. We will, for those of you watching, we will have a link to the Alaska Barbecue Inc., the Facebook page and the website down below. So if that's something you want to plug into, or if we want to check out the barbecue scene up here in Alaska, that's probably going to be the best place to go check it out. So
yeah, it's got all of our information. The state championship is coming up here in just a couple weeks, and yeah, all the information is on akbbq.org. Yep.
Outstanding. Well, thanks for joining us, and thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.